Okay, so let's get started. Thank you so much for joining. This is the Exploratory Online Seminar number 80. This time, I'd like to go over window calculation with chart and data wrangling. This window calculation thing is actually from the whole history of the exploratory. We had this one at the very, very beginning of the history of the exploratory because we thought this window calculation itself is basically just calculating things, right? So, but however, I see it like being applied in many different fields, and then, sometimes I see this way more than actual sort of like like statistics or even machine learning or whatever the analytics. Most of the time, the people actually do the calculation, adding up the numbers and then multiplication, whatever, and then visualize the data and then get some insights, get some useful insights out of it. And then when you do it, there's this window calculation is such a powerful tool. So it's not really the analytics itself, but it's more like something to do with the data wrangling, or it's more like how you calculate the data, but it's a really powerful tool or method, if you will. Okay, so let me introduce myself. My name is Kan Nishida, CEO at Exploratory. We build Exploratory to democratize data science and make it easier for more people to access or use data science methods or technologies to understand their data better. So our vision is the data-informed decision-making is essential to make this world better. So therefore, we think we can contribute by democratizing data science by building the tool called Exploratory, and also the providing or sharing our knowledge and skills through the seminar and the training. Okay, so the Exploratory is really a modern and simple UI or UI experience to do to access the data and then manipulate and clean and transform the data. We call it data wrangling, and then visualize the data, and then analyze the data with various statistics and machine learning algorithms. And then you get the insights, and you want to share the insights with others. So the communication is also the important piece. So these 5 tasks are the things that you can actually do through the modern and simple UI. That's what the Exploratory is. Okay, enough about the introduction. So let's get into the seminar itself. So this is the Exploratory Online Seminar number 80. Today, I like to go through window calculation with chart and data wrangling. So the agenda, mainly there's 3 things. One is what is a window calculation? I'm going to kind of touch base on that a little bit, and then do the real thing, the window calculation itself. First, I'm going to use the chart to do the window calculation. And then there are many things you can do. There are many types of window calculations, but I picked the 4 common ones, like a cumulative sum, difference, or percent of difference, and moving average, and then growth rate. And then the last, not least, is that window calculation can be done in chart, but also can be done as a data wrangling step. So I'm going to do the demonstration on that as well. Okay, let's start with what is window calculation. So window calculation is sometimes people call it table calculation. Maybe there are other ways to describe what this is, but it's really it's a row level calculation that is sensitive to grouping. So row level meaning it's a one row by row, right? So what is not row level? I mean, if you come from Excel, of course everything is a row level. It's like you calculate one row, and the next row you calculate others. Another. What is different from row level is that summarization, or you might say like aggregation. Okay, so sometimes you want to calculate the sales for the, maybe like 20 rows, which happen to be for, United States sales numbers or something like that. Then you want to get the one sales number for those 20 rows. That is not a row level calculation. That's more like a group level calculation. So there's that difference. That's why this is a row level calculation that is sensitive grouping. So sort of like a typical calculation in exploratory called create calculation, and then the summarization or aggregation. There's something in between. That's window calculation. So let's just highlight this a little bit. So summarize is, let's say, if we use the sum of sales or total of sales, and then we have the data like this, right? So like market column, order date, when, how much of the sales for, particular months. So we have 3 columns. And as you can see, if you want to summarize the sales numbers, and we have 2 groups here. Let's say by summarized by market, then we have 2 groups, so like Asia and Europe, right? So you can group these sort of like, we call it grouping, but create 2 partitions, if you will. Then at the end, what you want is these 2 rows, 1 row for each group. Okay, and then obviously the values should be the sum. In this case, a sum, it can be mean or average or median or anything else. But the key point is when you do the summarization or aggregation, you ended up as a not much less number of rows. Precisely is 1 row for each group. Okay, so that's summarize and aggregation. That's not what we want to talk about today. I'm just using it as a sort of like a comparison to the window calculation. So window calculation case, we're going to use a sum function, which is a total. Okay. Actually, sorry, I'm not going to use a total here. That doesn't make sense. But calculate. Oh, actually, I'm going to use some calculation. That's perfect. So first, we want to create a grouping. What we want to do here is, let's say that we want to calculate the percent of total for each row. So look at the Asia, like we have 3 rows. The first row has a number of 100. And 100 is like what's the percentage of the total of sum of the Asia? Okay, so that's what we want to do. So it's like a total part is kind of similar to summarization or aggregation. Okay, so first we create the groups, so okay, Asia group and Europe, or we create 2 partitions. And then we use some function to calculate the total of the sales for each group, in this case, Asia and Europe. So now like 440 for Asia, 340 for Europe. Okay, and then notice that the right-hand side column says total. The numbers do kind of duplicate or repeat itself. 440 for Asia, and then 340 repeated 3 times. But that's really the key point here. But also another thing is that like we calculated the total by using a sum function, but this is not the total for the entire data. Okay, this is a total of each group. And once we can calculate that, then all we need to do is just use a division. So 100 divided by 440 ended up becoming 0.23 or 23%. Okay, and then we do that like in each row. Okay, so now you are probably understand. So this is a row by row calculation. Okay, but then we actually use summarizing or aggregating function, in this case, a sum function. And then that part is a group sensitive. We get the total for each group, but after that, after that operation, then we do the calculation 1 by 1 or 1 row by 1 row. Okay. So that's really the nutshell on the window calculation. Again, window calculation is somewhere kind of between create calculation or like row-based calculation and summarization, somewhere between, because at the end of the day, you do the calculation 1 row by row, but also group sensitive. Okay, and it turned out this is very powerful because this is just a case of like percent of total calculation, but cumulative sum functions or running total, sometimes some people call it that way, or moving average, or compared to a year ago or a quarter ago kind of calculation, all do the same thing, which is basically use the same logic, which is presented in a window calculation. And then in exploratory, you can do that inside of the chart or as a data wrangling step. Okay, so we're going to start with a chart to sort of focus on what are the window calculation, what can window calculation do first, And then later on, like I'm going to introduce, like you actually can do the same thing as a data wrangling step. If you're familiar with the exploratory data wrangling step, is to sort of transform that data and then by step. Okay, and then you can create a chart to a particular step of the data. Okay, so let's start with the chart. If you do the chart, like inside a y-axis menu, there's a window calculation menu. And then there is also a quick window calculation menu as well. That is basically sort of like a shortcut. So, it depends. Like I use quick window calculation because most of the time, like all I need to do is just select one thing and then boom, I get what I wanted. But sometimes you might want to do some kind of adjustments, or maybe like you don't see the thing that you want to do under the quick window calculation menu. Then you want to go to window calculation to set up from scratch. And in the window calculation dialog, there are different various type of window calculation, and you can select from. Okay, and again, if you want to do this from data wrangling step, there's a column header menu. You basically see the very similar menu as well. And then you get the UI to do the window calculation. I think we had this for about a year now. So like if you're an old exploratory user and haven't upgraded for like last maybe like 4 or 5 releases, and then you might not have this UI. But now with the latest release, it's been a year or so, like we have this UI. And then when you do it, it's window calculation step will be added on the right-hand side. Okay, so let's use a chart and let's start with a cumulative sum, how we can actually create something like this. I'm going to use the Airbnb New York data. Each row represents each property that is listed on Airbnb. Okay, so let's just go to the exploratory first. And then here's the Airbnb data. And the key thing is this column called host since. That means the day each property is being added to host Airbnb. Okay, so that is starting from 2008 to 2019. Okay, and another one, like later on, like I like to use this neighborhood group. So it is a New York data. There's the 5 boroughs, Manhattan, Brooklyn, Queens, and so on. Okay, and then basically, like I like to see something like this. I'm gonna just click on this button, chart button. Before that, let me just go to table view. So this is we already saw on the slide. Each row represent each property. Okay, but this time, like I just want to create a chart, a simple chart like this. And then now what we have is under the chart view is that x-axis host since. So this means, for example, 2020, 4,590 properties were added to the Airbnb. Okay, and then I'm going to change that to, instead of a year, I'm going to change to months. Like then I can see like month to month sort of trend. And the y-axis is number of rows. So like, for example, again, this one, 2012, this time the July, there are 511 properties being added. So now this is okay, but also like I like to see like how many properties are on the Airbnb on any given day. So for example, instead of knowing 511 for the 2012 July, I like to see at this point, up to this point, how many properties were on Airbnb in total. So that's what we want to do. So in order to do that, like you want to do the cumulative calculation. Okay, so to do from this y-axis menu, and then window calculation or quick window calculation. The quick window calculation is like shortcut. And in this case, this is what we want to do is use cumulative sum. Okay, and if you want to do like cumulative for some reason, cumulative mean or median or some other aggregation function, then you want to go to window calculation. This is going to open the window calculation dialog, and then you can do the, all sorts of setting. But this time, I'm going to use quick window calculation and then simply select cumulative sum. And boom. This is basically like what I wanted to do, which is that, for example, let's find this December 2012 July, I think here. So up to that point, there are 6,416 properties being added accumulatively. Okay, so now like I can answer the questions like, okay, like at this point, this is very end of this data, like how many of the properties are on the Airbnb. Okay, so it's by just clicking on just one single shortcut, now we have the cumulative data. And then this one, this is just kind of like adding numbers, right? So it's not even a window. Windows, think of it, window is sort of like each group consider that as a window. But this one is like entire data, like I just accumulated it all the way up. But what if we introduce the group? So for example, neighborhood group, right? So like Manhattan and Brooklyn, I want to see like how those properties being added in each neighborhood. To do, like I can actually do by using the color and then go select the neighborhood group. And I can see like which neighborhood has been adding more properties or less compared to other neighborhood group as well. This one is sort of like kind of area chart-ish looking, but I can actually change that to line chart and see the comparisons among the properties. Obviously, Manhattan, Brooklyn, those two boroughs have been accumulatively adding way more properties than other neighborhood. Okay, so that's a cumulative sum. And then let's go to the next topic. There you go. Difference and percent of difference. This one that we do often, especially for something like financial data. This is a historical stock price data for tech companies like Google and Amazon and Facebook and so on. And then when we visualize it to see the trend of the stock price data, and it becomes something like this. Okay. And then if you are the investor, you don't really care. I mean, like obviously you care, like up and downs and the stock price, but stock price always ups and downs. And then like knowing the actual price, let's say like today is $350 or something like that, doesn't really meaningful. It's not really meaningful because you as an investor, what you care is how much gains or loss you have made, not how much, the price or how much price went down today or last, couple months or something like that, right? So what we want to do is even like comparing among these companies' performance, I like to see compared to the first day or, any particular day, and then like how much the price went up or went down. Okay, so if you purchase the stock price at the bottom, then any price moving is actually the gains. But if you purchase at the kind of near the top, any price movement is always a loss, right? So basically, where is your sort of like a criteria date? So let's go with a simple thing. It's like a beginning of the day, beginning of the data. You can actually use a filter to limit, when the data starts from. But let's imagine like, okay, this is the first day, and then like I mean, like at the very left-hand side, and then I like to see how much of the difference from that point. Okay. So basically what I'm saying is something like this. So first day on the most left-hand side, and then you just draw the reference line on the red dotted lines. And I like to see like how much of the difference. This time somehow it's all going up, so it's good. But most of the time it can go down as well. So, but even goes down, then like, I like to see like negative values, how much price went down, like let's say -30, -100 or something like that. And then eventually, like I like to come up with something like this is, based on the zero, how much of the price, trend goes up and down. And then eventually, like I like to compare among different tech stocks as well. How we do it? So here is the Apple stock price. And then, I mean, this is a kind of artificial price. And then I'm not sure it was really $40 or not. But anyway, so we have this data. And then what we want to do is we want to get the first value, in this case, 40, because that's the first day in this data, which is a 2018-0101. And then like we want to actually, once we get this first value, and then all we need to do is just calculate the difference. So it's that simple. So only the key thing is how we can get the first value. And once we get it, and then we can get the difference. But what happens like if we have two groups, like Apple and then Google? And then because the problem is if we get the first value, obviously, which is 40, and then the Google is like $40 is kind of like nothing because the Google's price range is way higher. So if we didn't realize and then do that calculation, basically the subtraction, what happened is that Google's difference is way big numbers. It's as if like if you're an investor, you're like, wow, we gained a lot of money here, but actually it's not. So what we want to do is the first value in each group. For example, the Apple, like we want to get the $40, and for the Google, the first value is this 1,000. So when we have data, we first group and then Apple and Google. When I said first you have to group or something like that, you don't have to because we do inside the chart. So the chart takes care of it automatically based on the column assignment. So you don't actually do the grouping, but I'm sort of like, this is for like a demo, sort of like explaining like how the calculation being done behind the scene. So we have two groups, Apple and Google, and then get the first value. And Apple case is 40, Google case is 1,000. Just like we saw at the very example at the beginning, the same value being repeated. Okay, so for the Apple, the 40 repeated 4 times, Google 1,000 repeated 4 times. And once we get this first value, then all we need to do is a subtraction. So difference, we calculate that. Okay. And obviously, the first row in each group, the difference is 0 because the first value, the value itself is the first value. Okay. So this is okay. And then we can actually, once we get the calculation, and like you can visualize and you can see that as well. But the problem is that, so next section is the percentage difference. The problem is this is, I have applied a difference. Okay. And then when you see something like this, and then recently, I think the tech stock went down dramatically, especially the Netflix, but that's not really the point. But when you look at something like this, wow, Netflix stock price performed pretty well up to 2020. So therefore, like whoever like invested Netflix must have had made humongous money compared to, let's say, like a Google, which is brown, or like Apple, which is purple. Those are like kind of a small range. And then if you have invested in Apple and Google recently, and like, oh, hey, like you guys are losers. But that's, of course, that's not the case because the price range might be different. Like Google's price range of the stock price could be way lower compared to Netflix. In that case, maybe that small amount of, let's say, like 10% of the down or 10% of the go up can be huge for the Netflix, but it can be small for the Google and Apple. So we have to take that as a consideration into account, right? So that's where like it comes, ratio comes to your useful tool. So basically what we want to do is calculate not just the difference, but also the ratio of the difference. So go back to that same table, we calculate the difference. Instead of visualizing this difference numbers itself, we do the ratio calculation, which is basically the difference divided by the first value. So compared to the first value, how much grow? Okay, so the first one is a 0, so it doesn't make much sense. But the second one, so the $5, okay, positive $5, it's not minus, it's a plus $5. But started as a $40. Okay, so 5 divided 40 is 12.5. Sorry, 0.125, and then multiply 100 to make percent as a unit. Okay, so now it's a 12.5. Okay, so the 12.5%, that's your gain if you invest in Apple on 2018-0101. Okay, so that's 12.5%. Next row is the same thing, 3 divided by 40, and then multiply 100 to get to the percent unit, then 7.5%. and then you do that calculation all the way down. Okay, so this percent of difference is like once you get the difference, then just a matter of like how you want to divide, what you want to multiply. It's pretty simple in that sense. Okay, so let's take a look at how we can go about this in the chart. So I'm going to open the stock price data. Okay, if I go to the summary view, what we see is a symbol. So we have the 6 companies. I'm going to move to the second step. We called that symbol to the company name to make it easier to read. So like Amazon, Apple, and Google, and so on. Okay, and then when I go to the chart and then create a chart here, let's say like a line chart, because there's trend data on the time axis. So the line chart usually helps me understand the trend. So I assign a date column. I want to see maybe like months to months. Yeah, it doesn't matter. Maybe I'm going to just go with a day, and then y-axis, I'm going to use this adjusted price numbers. Okay, and then I'm going to just make sure like I don't want to add up in an intended way. So I'm going to change that to the mean. This data is like each row is a day by day data. So like a mean and the sum ended up giving us the exact same amount as long as you use this aggregation level as a day. If you change that to month, then if you use a sum, that means you sum up all the numbers for that month. So you got to do that mean. But anyway, in this case, the same. And then, so now like we have this, and then like, I'm going to assign the symbol. Oops, the legend is still showing the code because the pin, chart pin is pinned to the first step before recoding this symbol to the friendly name. Okay, so I'm going to move this chart pin to the second step, making sure the data is coming from the step 2. Okay, so now this is the stock price trend data. That's what it is. But from here, I like to calculate the percent of difference. Okay, so from the menu, y-axis menu, and then go to quick window calculation. And then here, percent difference from first or from previous is 2 options. This time we want to do first because I want to see like how much of the, for example, Netflix percent difference from this particular point. Okay, so percent difference from first, and then it says percent difference from first as well, and then this is what we get. And then if I click on this green text, I can see something more more configuration options here. Okay. And then this one percent difference from this time we selected first, but you can select other option as well. Maybe a specific value in a specific particular date. You know, I invested in 2020-0101, then you can select that as well. Okay, so now this is good. And then now we can see a slightly different picture here, which is basically like Apple is the one who is performing well. The color coding is slightly different from the slide, so bear with me. But here's a Netflix, which is a red color. So if you have invested Netflix some 2017, beginning of 2017, you still make money, but about like 182% gain, which is pretty good. But compared to Apple, which is 468%. I have no idea. But anyway, so that's different. So it can give you like a completely different idea than seeing the raw values or seeing the raw values with the different options. Okay, so that's percent of difference. And then also though, like you can use the chart filter to start from 2019 or 2020 or whatever that day that suits to your needs. Okay, so next topic is here, the moving average. And moving average, I'm sure like you have heard about it, very common, especially for stock price data or financial data. Even like a COVID-19, like, people being like last 3 years really care about like how much of the number of the infected or number of the deaths. And then every day the number goes up and down, just like a stock price. So then it's kind of hard to see the trend, overall trend. Is it like going up or coming down? Like which way we moving? So in that case, what we do is use the moving average, which is, let's say, the 7 days moving average. That means for the previous 7 days, and you get the one sort of like average numbers, and then use that average number is for today's number. You do that for the all date periods, okay, all the dates, and then ended up like sort of like kind of like a smooth line or smooth curve, because when you have the 7 days period, sometimes the price dramatically goes up or goes down, but by using the average, it's kind of smooths out, basically getting rid of like sort of like outlier-ish values. Okay, so so how you calculate it is, let's say like a 3 days average. And then this data starts from January 1st, January 2nd, January 3rd, and so on. Okay. And then 3 days average, that means you need 3 days to calculate the average. You don't want to do it 1 day or 2 days average, right? Obviously, it's 3 days. So the first row and the second row, you cannot calculate because you don't have 3 days yet. The third day, the January 3rd, now you have 3 values. And now like you can calculate the average. So sum them up and then divide by 3. And it ended up like 123.33. And then do the same thing in the next. So like you move this sort of like window or calculation period and then next one. So like now it's always 3 days and then divided by 3, 156.67 and so on. And the first two, like I said, like we don't have enough data. So therefore it ended up like NA or missing values. Well, why don't we calculate that with the next 3 days, not the previous 3 days? You can actually do, or you can choose that kind of option as well. That is called window alignment. Okay, so the one we saw in the previous slide is called right align. So time starts from left-hand side to go into the right-hand side. That's the kind of like a mindset you want to have. Okay, and then if that's the case, the right align is always like when you have the, in this case, a 3 days period, right aligns like the right side, in this case, the red color background, 123. So that it's always aligned, the right side of the window. That's where the whole calculation is being aligned, okay? So what if like we do the center align, that means when you have the 3 days window and then the center, in this case, January 2nd. And that's where you can get the calculation. So 3 days window calculation with the center aligned, meaning the previous day, the day, and the next day, 3 days, and then the average of those 3 days. Okay, and the left align is basically the bottom one. So the left align is always a 3 days window, but the left side has the value. And then make sure the left side has a value. So the next 3 days, or I mean, including the particular day or given day. So that case, you end up like having an NA or missing values at the very end. But sometimes that's you might want to do. Okay. So and then like obviously like when you have a stock price and you see typically like you see like 25 days moving average, 75 days moving average. I'm sure like this one's each domain has a different sort of like kind of a common numbers of what's the period. But that's not really the point here. Like this is a point that my point is like you can actually adjust it the way you can it makes the way it helps you to understand the overall trend. So that's something that we want to see here. So let's try to do, so here's a stock price data. I want to see that sort of like moving average. So to do, I'm going to just copy this, duplicate, and then create another chart, basically the same. I'm going to remove this window calculation here. So let's see. Okay, so now we are looking at the 5 different companies. Okay, I'm gonna separate them out just by using a symbol. And then now like we have 6 different company stock price trend in a different charts. Right now, the y-axis has been sync. So because of Netflix price is kind of go super high up there. So all the other charts looks like kind of like a flat-ish. So I'm gonna uncheck this sync y-axis to make it more optimized for each chart for the y-axis. Okay, so now like we have this, and I like to draw more like kind of a smooth line to give us more overall trend. Okay, so to do from y-axis menu and then quick window calculation, and then there's a moving average. And the default is right now the 7. And then this 7 is basically the window size. It doesn't tell you like 7 days or 7 months or 7 weeks or anything like that. It's just the window, 7 window periods. And then that unit is really dictated by here. So this data, the one we are seeing is basically the day-by-day calculation. Aggregation level is day. So therefore, 7 means 7 days. You can change it here window size to be, I want to see like 25 trend, then it makes this curve to be, or the line to be much more smoother. Okay. And here's window alignment and other setting in this window as well. Okay. All right, so that's the moving average calculations done inside a chart. And the last window calculation type is a growth rate. This one is very common, especially in a kind of business environment, because when you have the sales, when you have a number of orders or number of customers, sometimes what you want to do, what you want to know is how much of the growth, not the growth from the previous month or previous last week, or simply like, this year's growth compared to last year. It's like you want to see the data on sort of like monthly data. But for example, this particular month, like let's say right now is February, then I would like to compare to the February last year. So that type of the calculation. So here we have the monthly sales data. And then like if you visualize it with bar chart, it becomes something like this. But what I want to see is not the sales number itself. I like to compare a year ago. This one is an example of the comparing to the year before, or like a year ago. So like January compared to the year ago January. But you might want to do like a quarter ago, or maybe like a week ago, or whatever that could be. Typically in the financial report, they do 2 versions, a year ago comparison and then a quarter ago comparison. Okay, so in this case, basically like you just compare these 2 values, okay, January to January, and then calculate the ratio, what's the percent increase or decrease, and then do the same thing for like next one, February and March, and then so on. Okay. And then, so when you have monthly sales data like this, and then basically like you want to compare the year ago data. And then once you get the year ago data, and then like you want to calculate the difference. This part is kind of like a difference or percent of difference, very similar. Once you get the year ago values, and then rest is the same. Okay. And then eventually we want to come up with this chart like this. In this case, orange is representing the sales number itself, and then blue bar showing percent of difference from a year ago. Okay, let's create this chart quickly. How you go about it? I'm going to go to the sales data. Okay, so this one is a little tricky. The sales data is not like monthly data right now. Okay, so like I want to do monthly. This chart is actually the monthly. So first, I'm going to go to the chart. Each row is actually each order. So like I want to calculate the monthly sales first. So like here, bar chart, and then order date, and then aggregation level, I switch to months. And then let's show the sales. Okay. So this is the sales numbers. What I want to do from here is, let's say here the January, and I want to compare this January number to this January number, 2012, and then calculate the ratio. And then I like to visualize that ratio. Okay, so I'm going to keep this sales here, and I'm going to add next y-axis because I want to bring those 2 measures in that same chart. So select the sales, and then Okay, and then basically, let's do side by side. It becomes kind of like this, right? The exact same values. But for the second one, like I want to calculate the ratio compared to a year ago. So for the same thing, the quick window calculation, the percent difference from period ago, or difference from period ago. This time the percent difference or ratio. Okay, so if I select this one, and then I'm going to bring back the stacked chart. And then what happened to the orange cells? What happened? Well, because this is now the percent difference. Let's say this one is more like 0.23 for 23% compared to this one is like 284,000. So the scale is way different. So like there's orange there if you really, really go close and then use a magnifying glass or something, but you can't see. So I'm going to assign this Y2 axis, assign these cells to the Y2 axis. Okay. So from here, menu, and then Y1, Y2 assignment. And then like, I'm going to assign to Y2. Okay. And then click on apply. And ooh, that's kind of weird. So that's because look at this orange. Now it's like, let's do the side by side. Okay. And then this orange starts 0%. So now it's showing a 24% compared to a year ago. But the blue is actually 0 line. So these two 0 lines not matching because the orange has a negative values. So the chart automatically try to adjust them together to be presented kind of like an optimized way, but not our human eyes optimized way, because we want to have 0% or 0 value to be aligned together. So you can actually do it from the Y2 axis setting. So from the here, the Y1, Y2 assignment menu that we were actually looking at, there's a sync Y1, Y2 scale at 0. So click on apply. And now 0% and then 0 sales dollars align. So this much easier to see. I'm not sure, like it's up to you, but for me, this is easier. And then now, last thing I want to do is I want to show this original sales values to be aligned. So you can actually change the marker for each y-axis. So from here, the first one says marker, and then I'm going to change that to line. And I click apply. And then like now like we have blue, which is blue line, which is showing the sales values, and orange, which is showing the percent of growth compared to a year ago in this case. Okay, so that's good. So that's pretty much all the window calculation type, right? And not all of them. It's like actually some of the window calculation types. There are a bunch of others, but I think you get that point. I got the point of like how you can use window calculation. The last topic is that like we have done this window calculation inside a chart, which is convenient, but also you can actually do as a data wrangling step. If you want to do from column header menu and then open the create window calculation and then do the setting. So in this case, what I want to do is the same thing we did today, which is a cumulative sum, right? This is Airbnb New York City data. We created this chart. And we did this window calculation inside a chart. But you can actually do it as a data wrangling step inside the chart, because sometimes not necessarily like you want to create a chart. You just want to create the data, give the data to somebody who has Excel, maybe shared with others, right? Or you might want to do like some kind of analytics on top of the data. So in that case, you can actually do from the column header menu. So we want to do the same thing, like calculate a cumulative sum, and in this case, as a data wrangling step. So from the column header menu, sometimes you get kind of confused which column to start with. It doesn't matter, you can change it later. But in this case, I want to go with something with like a date axis. So from the host since column header menu, then there is something called create window calculation. Okay, and then window calculation. And then whatever the menu here, it doesn't really make sense to me this time. So I'm going to just click on, sorry, what I want to do is go back to the chart. Okay, so you remember this one, actually, like this one, the chart have aggregated or summarized the number of rows by month already. And then on top of the summarized data, it does the cumulative calculation. So I have to actually do the summarization. I totally almost forgot about that, because if I don't, what is going to happen is to try to add the numbers in the row by row, right? So I'm going to do the summarization first. So from here, select the summarize aggregate. And what I want to do is I'm going to calculate month to month number of rows or number of the properties. So what that means, if I change the aggregation level to month, this is summarize window, not window calculation yet. And I click on preview button. Then now, like I'm seeing like 2008, August, September, October, and how many numbers of the properties being added in a particular month. Okay, so that's good. So at this point, something like this. Okay, and then like I want to actually do like later on like use a neighborhood, right? So right now the neighborhood information is gone because inside the summarized window I didn't add the neighborhood as a grouping. Okay, so I'm gonna select the neighborhood group which has a Manhattan, Brooklyn, Queens type of information, and then click preview, and then I get the so like now inside, for example, date 2008 September, there are 3 rows: Brooklyn, Manhattan, Queens, and so on. I can actually change it. So, for example, by drag and drop, and then now like if I click on it, now it's a Bronx first, and then inside the Bronx there are a bunch of those dates, and then after that go into the Brooklyn and then Manhattan and so on. Okay, either way, in this case, it's not a big difference. And then I'm going to click run button. And then like I get that monthly number of rows, meaning number of properties for each neighborhood group. Okay, from this point, now like after the summarization, this date is already sorted. Sometimes you're not sure, then like you might want to make sure do the sorting of the data, because what we're going to do is we're going to start doing a cumulative sum, which is simply, or kind of like a stupid way, just adding the numbers from the top to the bottom. It doesn't care what date and that kind of stuff. Okay, so but anyway, so I'm going to use and in this case it's already sorted, and also yeah, it's already sorted. So I'm going to go with the create calculations, and then what I want to do is this number, on top of this number, I want to start adding those numbers. So from column header menu, and then window calculation, and then there's a cumulative sum. So in this case, I started with this numeric column. So that's why like I luckily found the cumulative sum menu. Sometimes if you are not sure which column to start with and ended up like from the date, and then you don't see create calculation cumulative sum. But don't worry about it. You just select whatever that is in the menu, and you can switch it later. So for example, if I select mean, and then this doesn't really make sense because the value is not this one. So I'm going to change that to number of rows. And then if I click on preview, what happens is I think the numbers being, what is this? Host since div me. I'm not sure like what I'm doing here. I'm going to select the group by the neighborhood group, and then host since mean. I don't know, like what am I getting here? That's kind of weird. Oh, let's say preview. That's weird. Why I'm getting, oh, sorry. Yes. That's that. Wow, I'm completely doing something wrong. What I wanted to do is this number of rows, because this number of rows has a bracket, and this is actually default sort of a pre-built calculation. But what I wanted to do is this number of rows, that number. So the 2147, that's the numbers that I want to accumulate. So it's very tricky here. Anyway, then like if I select it, and then cumulative, I don't have to change anything. All I need to do is just change the column name if I want to. Yes, I want to, so that I'm not going to get confused or cheated by. So here's a cumulative sum, and then preview. So there you go. So now this number is a 2 plus 1 is a 3, and a 3 plus 4 is a 7, and it's all accumulated. And all the way down to now it's doing a Bronx. And then once it changed to the neighborhood group to Brooklyn, the numbers goes back to the default, the initial value. So like 2. And then 2 plus 9 is 11, and so on. Okay, and then click on the round bottom, and then you get the cumulative sum column. Okay, so this case, I might have done like a little bit of adventure, ended up and didn't turn out very well, but sometimes you get this data and simply you go from here, window calculation, cumulative sum, and then you get that, and then click preview, and you get the cumulative sum numbers, and that's pretty okay. But again, you remember this one, if you didn't select the grouping, what's going to happen is you keep accumulating the numbers. But hey, you know what? I want to create a partition, and then so that it doesn't do this kind of calculation across the groups. Then in that case, using the neighborhood group, and then this number, click on the preview button, and then this number doesn't carry over to the next different neighborhood group in this case. Okay, either way, if I do that, basically to do the same thing with the next step that which I created, I'm gonna delete the last step. Okay, so here I got the numbers here. Sometimes you wanna do the calculation on top of these numbers. So in that case, this data wrangling step is actually the way you wanna go. But something just to do something like this, you don't need a data wrangling step, because look, what we have done is like I had to create a summarize, I had to create a window calculation. On top of that, I got even confused by it. So it's a little bit until you get used to it, you might get confused. If that's the case, just go to the chart and then use this window calculation. Most of the case, like I don't know, 80%, 90% of the case, that's good enough. Okay, so that's it for today's window calculation. Let me summarize the end. So basically, we have two options. One is do the window calculation in chart, do the chart window calculation in data wrangling step. The window calculation is basically somewhere kind of between the create calculation, which is row by row, or aggregation summarization, which is a group-based calculation, with somewhere in the middle. Okay, but at the end of the day, you want to get the calculation row by row, but you want to use that sort of aggregation function, like a sum or mean or first or that kind of calculation, and then do the calculation in a group sensitive way. In this case, for example, neighborhood group or something like that. So which one to choose? Like I said in the seminar, the chart, I think the chart is the first option for you. As long as possible, use the window calculation inside the chart. As long as your end goal is to visualize or create a chart. But your end goal is to create the data, then you want to go to the wrangling step. Or your end goal, you want to do some calculation on top of the window calculation, calculated data, then you want to do the data wrangling step. Okay. And that's it for today. So last couple things, the whole online seminar, future seminar, and also the past recording of the online seminar. Go to our website, go to the LAM and the online seminar. That's where you can find the information. And also don't forget, under the LAN, there's how-to tutorials and how-to video. We have published a bunch of notes and with step-by-step instructions, and also the video as well. And if you have any questions or feedback, suggestion, please feel free to reach out to me at kan@exploratory.io. Also, we have the Twitter account, Exploratory Data. We make announcements and introduce new features and then all the information about Exploratory. So please follow if you do the Twitter. Otherwise, thank you so much for joining today's seminar. And with that, I'd like to open up for the Q&A session.